Firstly, I'd just like to make the point that we're very fortunate that His Majesty has allowed us to use Buckingham Palace for this event. Her bravery was inspirational, extraordinary. She received the George Cross, that she was the face of a much wider body of operations, made possible by a network of dedicated teams behind the scene.
The accusations came first, whispered through palace corridors, before they erupted in public. Queen Camilla and her daughter Laura Lopes were accused of undermining the monarchy itself. They were not just critics of Catherine, Princess of Wales, and Princess Anne. They were accused of plotting to weaken them. And on the day of Trooping the Color, 2025, their hostility could no longer be hidden. The parade began as tradition demanded. Thousands of soldiers, horses, and military bands filled the mall. The golden carriages gleamed, flags snapped in the wind, tourists pressed against the gates. But behind the spectacle, tensions spread like smoke. King Charles III sat upright in his carriage, his face pale, his hands clenched. The weight of illness kept him from the saddle. By his side sat Camilla, the queen consort, smiling but watchful. She waved at the cheering crowds, yet her eyes often strayed to Catherine. Catherine emerged radiant, walking with her 3 children. The public roared for her. She smiled, calm but commanding. After months away from the spotlight, her return felt almost regal in itself. She had prepared for this moment. The speech she carried was not just a message, it was a declaration. At the same time, Princess Anne, mounted on her horse, carried the gravity of history. Anne had served the crown for decades. Now she carried something more. She was to confer upon Catherine a new honor, the title of Marshal of the Monarch's Honor. It was not a gesture of vanity. It was a recognition of duty, resilience, and the future role of women in the monarchy. The ceremony began when the parade drew to its pause. Catherine stepped forward, her voice steady as she addressed the nation. She spoke of sacrifice, of the women who had carried burdens silently for centuries, of mothers and daughters who stood in the shadows of kings. Her words touched the crowd. Even hardened officials held their breath. The people listened, not just as subjects, but as witnesses of something shifting. And then it happened. Princess Anne stepped down. With solemnity, she pinned the insignia upon Catherine and declared her Marshal of the Monarch's Honor. The applause rose like thunder. Soldiers cheered. The crowd roared again. For a moment, unity seemed possible. But Camilla moved, her voice, sharp as glass, cut through the air before the cheering could fade. "This is not valid," she said. "My sister-in-law has no authority to grant such honors. She is not the sovereign. She is overstepping. And this woman," Camilla pointed toward Catherine, her words bitter, "does not understand her place." Gasps rolled through the crowd. The cameras turned. The music faltered. What had begun as celebration was now spectacle of another kind. Laura Lopes, Camilla's daughter, joined in. She had long remained in the background, away from titles and official duties, but now her tone mirrored her mother's venom. "This is a charade, a desperate attempt to elevate Catherine. It insults the king. It insults the crown." The public was stunned. The insult was not subtle. It was open defiance, broadcast across the world. The clash was no longer hidden in whispers. It was now war, fought in daylight. Prince William reacted first. His face darkened. He stepped forward, his hand rising, his voice low but firm. "You will not speak this way to my wife. You will not humiliate my aunt." The words carried weight, not just as a husband's defense, but as a future king's warning. For a moment, it seemed he would say more. But Catherine raised her hand, calm and decisive. She stopped him, her eyes steady. The silence was heavy. All eyes fell upon her. The cameras waited. The people leaned forward. And Catherine spoke. Her voice was soft, but each word struck like steel. "The crown is not only a burden for men to carry. Women have served it, guarded it, and preserved it. Princess Anne represents that strength. Today, she has the right to honor it. To deny her is to deny the legacy of this nation." The crowd erupted in applause. Her words were not only a defense of Anne, they were a strike against Camilla's claim. Catherine had turned the insult into a declaration of legitimacy. Camilla's smile faltered. Laura's face hardened. What was meant to be their triumph had shifted against them. The stage that was supposed to reveal Catherine's weakness had instead shown her strength. The monarchy itself had witnessed who commanded the moment. And so the battle lines were drawn. On one side, Camilla and her daughter, desperate to secure influence while the king's health declined. On the other, Catherine and Anne, bound by dignity and the people's respect. Between them stood William, torn between loyalty to his father and defense of his wife. The Trooping the Color had begun as a celebration. But it had become something else, a public confrontation that revealed the fractures at the very heart of the monarchy. And the world was watching. The applause for Catherine had not faded when the cameras shifted again. Camilla's lips tightened. She would not retreat. Her pride had been struck in front of millions, and she would not let her authority slip away so easily. She leaned forward in her carriage, her voice sharper now. "You forget yourself, Catherine. You are not queen. You are not in command of this monarchy. To parade honors like trinkets insults His Majesty's reign. It insults the Constitution." The words echoed. The crowd, which had cheered moments earlier, now murmured. Some gasped. Others booed. But Camilla pressed on, her daughter standing tall beside her, nodding in agreement. Laura Lopes' voice was more cutting than her mother's. "My mother speaks truth. Tradition is not a game. Power is not a stage. Princess Anne is respected, yes, but she cannot invent authority where none exists. And as for Catherine," Laura's eyes swept the crowd, cold and defiant, "she plays the role of saint while disrespecting the king and queen themselves." It was a dangerous escalation. To accuse Catherine of disloyalty in front of the nation was not only personal, it was political. Every camera caught the venom in Laura's tone. Every microphone captured her contempt. Prince William's hands clenched at his sides. He looked at his stepmother and his stepsister with fury he could barely contain. His voice was low, but clear. "You dare? You dare accuse my wife of dishonor in front of our people? You insult, not just her, not just Anne, but me, and through me, the future of this crown." The audience erupted. Cheers and shouts, cries of support for Catherine, jeers toward Camilla. The line between loyalty and rebellion was suddenly visible. The monarchy's unity had cracked wide open, live on the world stage. King Charles remained silent. His illness weighed on him. His eyes flickered between his wife and his son. His lips moved, but no words came. He seemed trapped, powerless in the storm that swirled around him. It was Princess Anne who intervened. She dismounted her horse, her movements slow but steady, and walked toward the center of the spectacle. Every step carried authority. Every glance demanded respect. Her voice was calm, but her words were iron. "I do not act for myself. I act for the stability of this crown. The king may reign, but I too serve, and I will not have my loyalty questioned by anyone." She turned, her eyes locking onto Camilla and Laura. "You speak of tradition. I am tradition. I have served longer than either of you have stood in these halls. I have never asked for glory. I have never asked for title, but I will not allow service to be mocked. Not today. Not ever." The silence after her words was crushing. Soldiers straightened. The band held their instruments frozen. Even the horses seemed still. But Catherine was not finished. She stepped forward again, her children watching from the balcony where they had been placed for safety. Her gaze never wavered. The monarchy survives because it adapts. It endures because it honors all who serve it. Princess Anne has given her life to this duty. To question her is to weaken the very foundation we stand upon. Her voice rose with quiet conviction. "And as for me, I do not seek crowns or thrones. I seek service. Service to this nation. Service to its people. That is the only honor I require. And that is why this recognition is not vanity, it is a necessity." End. The crowd erupted once more. The applause was louder, stronger, drowning out the whispers of dissent. Catherine had turned defense into victory, her words framing Anne not as a rival to the king, but as the embodiment of loyalty itself. Camilla's face darkened. Laura's jaw tightened. Their attack had faltered. What was meant to humiliate had elevated. What was meant to divide had united. And yet, behind their anger, there was calculation. Camilla leaned toward her daughter, whispering words too soft for the microphones but clear enough in her expression. This battle was not over. It had only begun. William moved closer to his wife, his presence protective but also proud. He touched Catherine's arm gently, a silent acknowledgement of her triumph. She glanced at him only briefly, then returned her gaze to the crowd. Still smiling, still unshaken. Princess Anne returned to her horse, her face set like stone. She had stood her ground. She had defended not only herself, but the dignity of the crown. But the fracture remained. The monarchy was no longer a single voice. The world had seen it. The people had felt it. The heirs and the consort were no longer aligned. And in the shadows of the cheering crowd, the whispers began again. What would happen when the king was gone? Who would command loyalty then? Would it be William and Catherine, symbols of renewal and respect? Or Camilla and her daughter, desperate to hold power against time and fate? Trooping the Color 2025 was meant to be a celebration. Instead, it had become a stage for open conflict. A royal drama, broadcast across the globe, that could not be ignored. And in that moment, one truth became clear. The crown was no longer unshakable. It was fragile, and every word spoken that day had driven another crack. The ceremony ended, but the noise did not. The applause for Catherine still echoed through the mall, yet beneath it ran something darker: division, outrage, speculation. The monarchy had been exposed. What was once whispered in drawing rooms now spilled onto the streets. Reporters swarmed outside Buckingham Palace. Headlines rolled within minutes. Camilla challenges Anne's authority. Catherine strikes back. Oh? Royal unity shattered on King's birthday. Screens lit up across the world. Commentators replayed the confrontation frame by frame. They analyzed every look, every gesture, every tremor in Charles's hand. Nothing escaped scrutiny. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was suffocating. Corridors once filled with ceremony now buzzed with whispers. Staff avoided one another's eyes. Officials debated in hushed voices what the clash meant for the crown. William and Catherine returned to their quarters, their children shielded from the chaos. William paced, fury still burning in his chest. They humiliated you. They humiliated Anne, and in front of the whole world, this cannot stand. But Catherine remained calm. She removed her gloves, folded them neatly, and set them on the table. Her voice was soft but unyielding. It already backfired on them. The people saw what happened. They saw who defended tradition and who attacked it. We don't need to scream louder. The truth is louder than anger. William stopped pacing. He looked at her, torn between admiration and frustration. She had faced venom with grace, and she had won. But the damage to the monarchy was real. He knew it. And so did she. Meanwhile, Princess Anne sat alone in her study, her uniform still on, her medals glinting faintly in the dim light. She had never sought confrontation, yet confrontation had found her. She thought of her father, Prince Philip, of his quiet strength, of his refusal to bend. She thought of her mother, the late queen, who had endured storms without flinching. And she whispered to herself, "I will not let them tear this apart." Camilla, however, was far from defeated. In her private rooms, she vented to Laura, her voice sharp and furious. They cheered her. They cheered Anne. Do you see what this means? If Charles weakens further, if he cannot appear, Catherine will stand taller, Anne will step forward, and we— She stopped, her eyes narrowing. We will be shadows. Laura clenched her fists. Then we fight harder. They humiliated us in public. We cannot let it pass. Camilla nodded. The plan forming in her mind was clear. They would question Catherine's legitimacy, undermine her influence, remind the world that Anne had no sovereign power. If loyalty shifted too far, their place beside the throne would vanish. The world outside the palace was already choosing sides. Crowds gathered in front of news cameras. Some shouted Catherine's name, waving flags, chanting support. Others muttered that Camilla had been right, that Anne had no right to bestow titles, that Catherine had overstepped. But the tide leaned heavily toward admiration for Catherine. Social media overflowed with praise. Clips of her words were shared millions of times. "The monarchy survives because it adapts," became a rallying cry. Memes crowned her the true face of the monarchy. Camilla and Laura, once secure in Charles's reign, now found themselves painted as antagonists. Their attempt to assert authority had exposed their insecurity. Their bitterness had been laid bare. Yet the king himself remained silent. That silence was louder than words. The people wondered, was he too frail to intervene, or did he agree with his wife? The absence of clarity only deepened the rift. In Parliament, even MPs weighed in. Some called for unity, warning against further division. Others criticized the monarchy entirely, using the chaos as proof of its fragility. The debate spilled beyond royal walls, becoming a question of national identity. And still, at the center of it, stood Catherine. She had not sought the crown. She had not sought titles. Yet her dignity and words had placed her on a higher pedestal than ever before. She had become the symbol of resilience, of renewal, of a monarchy that could still inspire. Anne remained her shield, her ally, her proof of tradition. William, her defender, grew in stature alongside her. The image of their united front struck deep in the hearts of the people. But in Camilla's chamber, the war council formed. "They think they've won," she whispered to Laura. "But they've only won a battle. The war for the crown is not over. We still have the king, and as long as Charles breathes, my word carries weight. They will learn that soon enough." Laura smiled, cold and determined. "Then let us prepare." The night fell heavy over Buckingham Palace. The streets outside still pulsed with noise, but within the walls, silence returned. It was not peace. It was the silence before the storm. For the world had seen the fracture. The people had chosen sides. And now, the monarchy faced its most dangerous test, not from outside forces, but from the war within its own family. The morning after trooping the color, the newspapers carried Catherine's image across every front page. She stood radiant, the insignia shining on her chest, Anne at her side. The headlines praised her composure, her strength, her quiet authority. But within Clarence's house, Camilla's fury was unrestrained. She slammed the papers onto her desk. They've turned her into a saint, into the savior of the monarchy. And where am I? Where is Charles? Where are we? Laura stood near the window, her arms crossed. She spoke with controlled venom. They are building her into the future queen already. If we do nothing, she will eclipse us completely. Camilla paced. Her voice hardened. Then we will not do nothing. We will remind the world of the truth. Anne's honor was symbolic, nothing more. Catherine's speech was theater, and theater cannot rule a kingdom. The plan was simple, but ruthless. They would use the king's illness, his authority, his silence. They would make him speak, even if his body resisted. His voice, even trembling, would remind the people where power lay. That afternoon, Camilla arranged a press statement. Carefully worded, framed as concern for tradition and respect for the crown, it emphasized that only the sovereign could bestow new honors. It praised Catherine for her warmth and grace, but undercut her by labeling her role ceremonial support. The statement carried Charles's name. Yet palace insiders whispered that the king had not written a word. His health had kept him in bed. Some said he had not even seen the text. Still, the message spread. News anchors read it solemnly. Headlines shifted. King reasserts authority amid royal rift. Camilla defends tradition. But for every supporter of the statement, there were doubters. Social media tore it apart. Hashtags questioning Camilla's influence trended worldwide. Did the king truly approve it? Or was the queen consort speaking in his name? Within the palace, William seethed. She uses my father's weakness as her weapon. This is not respect, it is manipulation. Anne agreed, her face grim. She hides behind his crown. But she cannot hide forever. When the king is gone, she will stand alone. And she knows it. Catherine, though, remained steady. She read the statement calmly, then folded it away. It does not matter. The people saw the truth. They heard Anne. They heard me. They cannot unhear it. Yet she also knew the danger. Camilla was not fighting for popularity. She was fighting for survival. And survival made her more dangerous than ever. Laura, meanwhile, launched her own offensive. Using her connections in art and society circles, she whispered stories about Catherine's ambition. She painted her as a woman hungry for power, desperate to outshine the queen herself. These whispers reached columnists, who began to pen speculative articles. Is Catherine too ambitious? Princess or politician? The seeds of doubt were planted, but Catherine did not falter. She attended charities, greeted children, spoke of service with humility. Every step she took reminded the people why they admired her. Every smile seemed to wash away the venom of rumor. And then came the moment that changed everything. A leaked video, grainy but clear enough. It showed Camilla in private, her voice sharp, her words damning. She thinks she's untouchable, but she's nothing without William. Strip her of the title, and she's just another girl in a dress. The leak spread like fire. Within hours, it was on every phone, every screen. Camilla's attempt to control the narrative had backfired. Instead of undermining Catherine, she had exposed herself as bitter and cruel. The palace scrambled. A second statement was issued, claiming the video was taken out of context, but the damage was done. The people had heard the malice in Camilla's voice. They had seen behind the mask. Catherine remained silent, refusing to comment. Her silence was louder than denial, heavier than defense. It made Camilla look smaller, meaner, disparity. William watched the storm unfold. For the first time, he saw victory within reach. They can smear us, they can leak lies, but they cannot erase what the people have seen with their own eyes. But Catherine, ever cautious, whispered back, "Do not underestimate them. A wounded enemy is the most dangerous. Camilla will not stop until she has nothing left to lose." And Catherine was right, for in the quiet of her room, Camilla stared into the mirror, her reflection lined with anger and fear. She thought of Diana, of the shadow she had once escaped, of the years it had taken to claim her place. And now, Catherine threatened to take it all away, in a single afternoon. Laura touched her shoulder. "Mother, we cannot retreat. If we retreat, we are finished." Camilla's voice was low, trembling, not with weakness but with fury. "Then we fight. To the last breath, we fight." The monarchy was no longer bound by ceremony. It was bound by conflict. The crown, once a symbol of stability, had become a battlefield, and the world, breathless, continued to watch. Days passed. Trooping the color faded from headlines, but the tension inside Buckingham Palace intensified. The air was thick with unspoken words, sidelong glances, and suppressed fury. Catherine, now firmly established as Marshal of the Monarch's honor, moved with a calm confidence that unsettled her rivals. Her children were her anchor. George, Charlotte, and Louis watched their mother with admiration, unaware of the intricate chess being played around them. Their coordinated appearances at public events sent a clear message. The next generation was poised, observant, and already embodying the values of service and dignity. Catherine's approach was methodical. Every appearance, every speech, every gesture reinforced her authority. She did not confront Camilla publicly. She let restraint speak louder than argument. Every smile, every nod to soldiers and citizens alike, built her image as a leader grounded in compassion and duty. Inside the palace, Camilla seethed. She could not challenge Catherine directly without risking public backlash. Instead, she worked in shadows. Meetings with advisors, quiet counsel from longtime allies, and discreet pressure on key household staff, all were aimed at undermining Catherine's influence. Laura was relentless. She used her social connections and media savvy to spread subtle doubts about Catherine's suitability. Rumors about ambition, protocol breaches, and overstepping boundaries floated through elite circles, whispered in halls and printed in magazines. Yet Catherine's public persona, carefully cultivated, absorbed the attacks without faltering. The turning point came during the king's private audience with his senior advisors. Camilla demanded recognition for her role as queen consort, arguing that the recent events at Trooping the Color had distorted public perception. Her voice was measured, but her eyes burned with barely concealed fury. Catherine, present as a witness, remained silent. She did not need to speak. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with Camilla's agitation, subtly shifting the room's attention. Anne, seated beside Catherine, chose her moment to interject. Her words were precise and unassailable. Majesty, the honor bestowed upon Catherine was not a usurpation. It was a recognition of service, of dedication, and of courage. She does not seek power beyond her duties. She strengthens the monarchy by representing it faithfully. Charles, weakened but perceptive, nodded slightly. Anne's statement carried weight. It reminded the room and implicitly Camilla that loyalty and service mattered as much as title. Camilla's frustration was palpable. She whispered sharply to Laura, "This is not over. She cannot be allowed to eclipse me. Not here, not ever." Laura smiled thinly. "She is bold, yes, but boldness can be met with strategy. We will find her weakness. We always do." But Catherine had anticipated resistance. She had allies in high places, officers, aides, and even members of parliament, sympathetic to the modernizing monarchy. Quietly, she began to strengthen these alliances, ensuring that her influence could withstand any palace intrigue. Public appearances became her battlefield. Each event was a display of dignity, competence, and quiet authority. Soldiers, ambassadors, and civilians alike were drawn to her poise. Her role as marshal allowed her to connect with regiments, reinforcing the crown's visibility in communities far beyond the palace walls. The tipping point arrived at a state banquet. Camilla arrived expecting dominance, flanked by her daughter, ready to assert authority. But Catherine's measured elegance, the subtle acknowledgement from Anne, and William's silent, commanding presence disrupted their expectations. Every toast, every movement, every glance reinforced the hierarchy that Catherine had carefully cultivated. Camilla's attempts to interject, to subtly mock or question, were met with polite deflection. Catherine's responses were precise, steeped in constitutional knowledge and personal grace. The queen consort realized too late that public perception had shifted irreversibly. Laura, sensing defeat, leaned to her mother. This isn't how it was supposed to go." Camilla's lips tightened. "Not yet. But the war is not over." Outside, the press had already framed the banquet as Catherine's triumph. Analysts described a new era for the monarchy, one in which service, dignity, and resilience mattered more than inherited titles or consort influence. Social media amplified every gesture, every smile, every nod as proof that Catherine had become the embodiment of the crown's modern image. Yet inside the palace, the tension remained. Camilla and Laura could not accept the shift quietly. The battle lines were drawn, and both sides understood that the coming months would determine not only their positions, but the very narrative of the monarchy itself. For Catherine, the challenge was clear: consolidate her role, protect Anne's legacy, and maintain public trust, all while navigating the dangerous currents of a family at war with itself. And for Camilla and Laura, the plan was equally clear: undermine Catherine, reclaim influence, and ensure that tradition remained theirs to control. Trooping the Color, 2025, had been a spark. The fire was only growing. Weeks passed since Trooping the Color. The palace remained tense, but the public's gaze was fixed firmly on Catherine. Every appearance reinforced her growing stature. Her speeches, her gestures, her very presence spoke of authority, resilience, and empathy. She had become the living embodiment of the monarchy's modern aspirations. Camilla and Laura, though relentless, began to realize their strategies were faltering. Every whisper of doubt they planted had been countered by Catherine's calm dignity. Every attempt at undermining her role only highlighted their own insecurities. Their influence, once unquestioned, now faced erosion. The king, fragile yet aware, observed quietly. He saw the loyalty of his family, the public's adoration for Catherine, and the strategic precision with which she navigated court politics. He understood that the monarchy's future rested not just on tradition, but on adaptability. During a private audience, Charles addressed Camilla with measured authority. "The nation sees the crown through our actions, our conduct. Catherine has shown resilience and strength. You may guide, but do not overshadow. The people must trust in the monarchy, not in division." Camilla's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Laura, beside her, clenched her jaw. The king's words were a quiet rebuke, yet the palace understood them clearly. The era of unchecked influence was over. Meanwhile, Catherine focused on her duties with renewed purpose. She visited regiments, attended charitable events, and worked alongside Anne to highlight the monarchy's service to the nation. Her children were always near, a visible symbol of continuity and hope. George, Charlotte, and Louis mirrored her poise, already learning the delicate balance of public life and personal integrity. The public noticed. Surveys and commentary painted a clear picture. Catherine was admired for her grace, her intelligence, and her resilience. She had transformed a potentially divisive moment into a demonstration of strength. Where Camilla and Laura had attempted to cast shadows, Catherine had shown light. The palace staff, once divided, now rallied subtly around her. Allies recognized that she commanded respect, not through intimidation, but through competence and poise. Her quiet authority became a stabilizing force amid whispers of internal strife. Princess Anne, ever the vigilant guardian, remained at Catherine's side. Her decision to appoint Catherine as Marshal of the Monarch's honor was vindicated, proving that foresight and courage could shape the monarchy's path. Anne's mentorship reinforced the continuity of tradition while embracing progress. At a royal reception marking the king's official birthday, Catherine stood at the center, flanked by William and Anne. Camilla and Laura, though present, were visibly subdued. The subtle shift in palace dynamics was unmistakable. Catherine was no longer a figure of controversy. She was a leader, respected and unassailable. The culmination came during the evening gala. Catherine delivered a brief address, highlighting service, unity, and dedication to the crown. Her words were met with applause, admiration, and reverence. Every gesture, every pause, every glance reinforced her role as a pillar of the monarchy. Camilla, observing from across the room, realized the truth she had long resisted. Catherine's strength was not a threat, it was a lesson. Authority was earned through service and integrity, not title alone. Laura's whispered criticisms faded into the background as the world celebrated Catherine's triumph. As the gala ended, Catherine walked through the grand halls, Anne and William at her side. The children followed, laughter and small smiles lighting the path. The monarchy had endured its test. The internal rifts had not destroyed it, they had defined it. Outside, the nation's gaze remained fixed on Buckingham Palace. Citizens, inspired by the dignity and resilience displayed, understood that the crown was evolving. Tradition and modernity, legacy and renewal, had been balanced with finesse. In her private chambers, Catherine reflected on the events of the past weeks. She had faced public scrutiny, familial opposition, and palace intrigue, and emerged stronger. Her victory was not measured by titles or honors, but by trust, respect, and the quiet power of steadfast resolve. Princess Anne, standing beside her, placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done well. The crown is in capable hands, and so is its future." Catherine smiled, her eyes steady. "Together, we ensure it endures. That's the legacy we carry forward." Outside, the night sky over London sparkled. The crown had survived, but it was no longer the same. A new era had begun, one where resilience, duty, and grace determined the monarchy's course. Catherine, now more than ever, stood as the symbol of this evolution, ready to lead with integrity, strength, and vision. And in the shadows, Camilla and Laura watched, planning, but now forced to reckon with a truth they could not deny. The monarchy's future was no longer theirs to command. It belonged to a new generation guided by tradition, yet boldly moving forward. The world had witnessed the transformation. The crown had endured the storm, and Catherine, Marshal of the monarch's honor, had emerged as its luminous center.